Good morning to you all and a very warm welcome. Thank you very much for joining our webinar this morning, which is called Emotional Intelligence, Talent Attraction, Retention and the Bottom Line. My name is Bev Nicholas. I'm the Regional Talent Director here at Page Group, and my responsibility is attracting, recruiting and training talent for Page Group in the UK. I'll hand over to Judy for her to introduce herself.
Hi, my name is Judy Purse. I am a psychologist by profession and director of a company called Roche Martin and the co-author of the Emotional Capital Report, which is a measure of emotional intelligence. It's an absolute pleasure to be with you here today. So I pass back now to Bev.
Thanks, Judy. So I'll just start off with running through what Judy will be covering for the main body of the webinar. And she'll start off with talking about a clear definition of what we mean by emotional intelligence, and then move on to look at emotional intelligence and high performance, also relating emotional intelligence to a multi-generational workforce, looking at EQ strategies in terms of talent attraction, retention and the bottom line, and then picking out competencies to look for versus competencies to develop, and finally covering off some case studies and practical tools that can be used for EQ in recruitment. So before we go into the main body of the webinar itself, I just wanted to give you some context for why we chose the topic of emotional intelligence to share with you. So as a recruitment firm, we hear a lot of our clients talk about the technical skills that they look for when they're recruiting new people. But in reality, clients often hire based on people skills and also personality. So when we talk about talent, it's important that we cover technical and intellectual competence, but also how emotionally intelligent people are, as this relates directly to how employees show up as individuals at work, but also how they interact and adapt to others. So this image also reflects the reality of the working world and how it's changed. So rapid technological advancements are occurring, but workforce productivity has remained stagnant. So in addition to this, people are being asked to adapt to constant change, and there's also an increase in stress-related absence. So as a result of that, well-being has become a real focus for many organisations. So looking at the image, if we need our workforce to perform better and remain in good health, we really need to be able to support them, giving them the right tools to thrive in times of constant change. So again, emotional intelligence plays a really important role in building high-performing teams and also in creating a really great business culture. So Page Group have done an awful lot of research around particularly the sort of top skills for success in 2019. And through conversations with employers across all sorts of industries and sectors, and also consumer research with over 2,000 workers, some of our key findings were that the top skills for candidates are communication, resilience and adaptability. And all of these linked to emotional intelligence. Adaptability came out as the most desirable skill of the year, as employers sort of seek out candidates who can cope with this sort of constant change and also increasingly diverse situations. However, really interestingly, 85% of candidates don't list adaptability as a skill on their CV. So for us, these findings pose key questions around how employers are proactively looking for emotional intelligence skills when recruiting, but equally important, how can we support teams to develop or really strengthen their emotional intelligence skills? So I'll now hand over to Judy to shed more light on how we as employers include emotional intelligence in our people strategies to attract and retain top talent.
Thanks, Beverly, and thanks for that really nice, insightful introduction, which I think really underpins why we're looking at the topic of emotional intelligence today. I'd just like all the participants to do two things very quickly in 1 minute, if you're that capable of working that fast. I want you to think of a question that you might have about emotional intelligence you'd like answered in this webinar. If I don't answer your question in the next 30 minutes, we've got a lot to cover in 30 minutes, then post it to the web host, and at the end, just in the last 10 minutes, hopefully we'll have a time to go through one or two of those questions then. You can do that, or either I would like some of you to have a go at writing down your current definition of emotional intelligence. What do you think emotional intelligence is? And then we're going to check that against the definitions presented by the experts in the area of defining emotional intelligence. So I'm just going to give you 1 minute just to have a little food for thought, to write down a question you would like answered about emotional intelligence, or your own definition of emotional intelligence from where you sit right now. So we'll have just another 35 seconds of silence while you do that. Okay, you can keep writing if you need to, but the reason I get you to write down that definition as your starting point is a very good question what emotional intelligence is. I know from my experience of, as we've worked with corporations for the last 10, 15 years in this area, that I've often been surprised, and still today, that some people think emotional intelligence is about being nice to people. It's about having good empathy and getting along with people. Well, it is that, but there is a lot more to it than that. And emotional intelligence is far from being a soft skill. There are many robust competencies involved in emotional intelligence, and we're going to discover some of what those things are today and think about why they are important in the workforce, in leadership, and in the recruitment process. So the first definition comes from Reuven Bar-On. He was one of the first theorists to create the first model for measuring EQ in the 1990s, and also defined a lot of what we believed emotional intelligence was back then. So he says that emotional intelligence is a cross-section of interrelated emotional and social competencies, skills and facilitators that determine how effectively we understand and express ourselves and understand others and relate with them, and how we cope with daily demands. Fairly simple and quite easy to comprehend. But now let's go to the social scientists of Mayer and Salovey. These are the guys that have sat in the basements of universities and done the really heavy groundwork of defining emotional intelligence as an intelligence that is different to IQ. And over the years, as they've discussed this, they came up with this definition, which is quite inclusive and I think shows that it has the basis in solid science. Mayer and Salovey define emotional intelligence as the capacity to reason about emotions and to use emotions to enhance thinking. It includes the abilities to accurately perceive emotions, to access and generate emotions so as to assist thought, to understand emotions and emotional knowledge, and to reflectively regulate emotions so as to promote emotional and intellectual growth. I'm sure none of you have a definition that sounds quite like that one, but if you have a chance to kind of think and sit on that one, it's a very all-encompassing. But hopefully when you look at your own definition, it should include these three factors. Emotional intelligence is a theory, a scientific-based theory of intelligence that helps us, one, to manage our own emotional states, to understand and manage our own emotional states, two, to understand other people and to be able to relate to them with ease, and thirdly, to help us to cope with change and the demands of daily living. If you had any of those 3 points or all 3 points, then give yourself good marks on your definition. Let's go to the next point. Okay, here we have a picture of the brain. We didn't just make up this idea of emotional intelligence at Roche Martin. The model is based in much scientific research, and in recent years, neuroscience has totally increased our understanding of why we act and behave the way we do and which sections of the brain are responsible for those actions and behaviours. What we know is our primary senses. When you see something, when you feel something, touch something, taste something, the information comes up through the brainstem at this base of the brain. And the messages, once they travel through the base of the brain, must come up into the prefrontal cortex area of the brain, which is where we can rationally think about our experience. However, before they come into the rational part of the brain, they pass through this system of emotional structures called the limbic system. In here, we have things like the amygdala, which is our emotional reactor center of the brain. So if you see something that alarms you, your amygdala fires off and you kind of have that fight or flight response. This other section, another part of it is the hippocampus. You know, when you walk into a room sometimes and you catch a smell, a sight or a sound, and you have an emotional memory, that's because as that whatever you've experienced has fired off the hippocampus and you have an emotional memory, which is where they're stored. What we hope for emotional intelligence is a great communication between this emotional part of the brain, the rational part of the brain, and we like to think of it, if you've got great emotional intelligence, it's like you've got a broadband connection between the two. If you come across some people who just seem to operate out of their emotions. They wear their heart on their sleeves and they're always having very emotionally reactive. And then you meet other people in the business world that are very, very rational, almost too rational, and there's virtually no emotional expression. So good emotional intelligence is when you have a good balance of emotional and rational thinking. So once this has happened, our ability to understand and reflect on our emotions helps us to use this information to arrive at accurate judgments and take positive, constructive actions. But we might ask, just repeating there, that emotional intelligence requires effective communication between the rational and emotional processes of the brain and a broadband connection between both. But why does this matter? Stephen Covey, who a lot of you will have read some of his books, he's written a lot about leadership, and a lot of people refer to him as an expert in the area of research, of leadership. He says that research shows us convincingly that EQ is more important than IQ in almost every role, and many times more important in leadership roles. This finding is accentuated as we move from the control philosophy of the industrial age to an empowering release philosophy of the knowledge worker age. It's very interesting. So the World Economic Forum Future of Jobs report. At one point in time and previously has never mentioned emotional intelligence. That recent report that was released now believes that emotional intelligence will be the second most sought after skill by employers by 2020. If you are wondering what Stephen Covey means when he talks about control philosophy of leadership, have a look at this profile. I'm putting this profile up of somebody that I met about 2 weeks ago, and he's the managing director of a department of a very large government organisation in the UK. This profile is pretty much what we would see when somebody is very controlling about their leadership style. Let me just explain a couple of things that are happening up here. The red dots represent how this person, let's call him John, sees his emotional intelligence across these 10 competencies. Overall, in self-reporting, when he answers the questions and those questions are compared to our normative data, he gets a score of 123. However, when we take raters to rate him, which would include his manager, probably 3 or 4 peers, 3 or 4 direct reports, and compare their scores to how they see him to how he sees himself, you have these blue lines. Now, a quick look at this will show you that the way he sees himself to be is very different to how others see him. Beverly mentioned earlier that the top skills for candidates, according to their research, was communications, resilience, and adaptability. And adaptability was the most desirable skill of the year, as employees seek candidates who can cope with increasingly diverse situations. According to that, this guy does not measure up to a great level of emotional intelligence leadership. His communications, we can see, are all one way. He's very straightforward. He certainly speaks his mind, but he doesn't listen to other people. He has fairly average optimism, so his resilience might be okay, but at times he can be quite negative. Not a very inspiring leader. And when it comes to his adaptability, it is 10 points below average, even though he believes himself it to be way above average. This kind of leader is somebody who uses his confidence, his independence, his straightforwardness to communicate his messages without taking into account what other people think and feel. This low score in adaptability means he doesn't like changes to daily routine. He finds it hard to change his opinion, and in fact, he can be quite stubborn and negative under pressure. I referred to the profile just to show you that it's just one page of the emotional capital report that we have developed. The emotional capital report is based on research over 10 and shows 10 emotional and social competencies that over 20 years demonstrate are linked to effective leadership. That's where that profile came from. So let's look now at EQ strategies in talent attraction, retention, and the bottom line. Martin Newman, who is my business partner and a renowned expert in the area of emotional intelligence, he says, and he believes that today we are competing on the basis of time and talent, and how you attract, retain, motivate your people, how you treat your customers, and how well your company is led are the vital differentiators in business today. We know that for 10 years, Martin says that for 10 years, research has told us that to be successful in our personal and professional lives, we need EQ. In particular, recent research has established clear links between specific emotional skills and outstanding leadership success. We know that having really great levels at every level of the business is the key to attracting and, most importantly, retaining talent, because Gallup researchers told us the number one reason that people leave a job year in, year out is because they don't like their manager. So what we've found in the past is that in the past, leaders used to use their authority to dominate followers and tell them what to do by enforcing compliance. And we're no longer in a world where we can do that, nor are we no longer in a world where charismatic personalities can be used to manipulate others into conformity. These skills or these approaches no longer work. Great leaders need to have the skills to manage their own emotions well, influence the emotions of other people, and kind of draw the organisation into positive outcomes, and to be great people leaders, the leaders that you want to work for, that you want to stay with because they're continually helping you grow and inspiring you. Let's look at the second aspect of talent attraction. Martin Seligman, who some of you will also have read some of his books about, he was the founder of the positive psychology movement and has written books such as Learned Optimism, Authentic Happiness, amongst many others. So there was an insurance agency in the US that came to Martin Seligman in 1990, and he said to him, "You know lots about the kind of skills that we need in leaders. If we were to hire the best salespeople for our life insurance policies, what is it that we should be selecting for in our recruitment process?" Martin Seligman said, "You only need one thing in your recruitment process for great salespeople, and that is for them to have solid optimism." So he went on to do some research and measured the optimism of the workers or the sales workers of metropolitan life agents. And he found out in that research that those who scored high in the emotional competency of optimism sold 37% more life insurance policies in their first 2 years. And agents who scored in the top 10% for optimism sold 88% more policies than those ranked in the most pessimistic. As a result of this research, MetLife then changed its hiring practices to include screening for candidates for optimism. In less than 2 years post the research, the company had more success hiring agents, expanded its sales force to more than 12,000, and increased its market share of the personal insurance market by 50%. And what we're talking about there is only one of the 10 components of optimism. We also see in our profiles that people that are great in sales have high self-confidence, good relationship skills, and great skills of empathy. But this study just looked at optimism alone. What about retention? Retention has become a particular challenge, I think, in the millennial workforce out there. The new workforce, I was starting to show my age here, you know, the much younger workforce, they don't seem to have the same work ethic as my generation or the previous generation. They need to believe and value what they do in addition to getting financial rewards for their work. And if they don't get it, they're really quick just to move on and go to another employer. It was interesting, about 10 years ago, Roche Martin and Martin Newman and myself were invited by an aerospace company to go and help them develop emotional intelligence of their senior executive team. And the reason they needed to do this is because the HR manager said to us, the senior executive team have a style of leadership that is totally unpalatable to our millennial workforce. Said in this organisation, she was telling us, we attract the very best graduates who want to come to a company like ours because they've heard of its reputation of having a lot of amazing engineers, and that it's a chance as an engineer to really grow and develop your career. The problem is they stick around for about 2 years And then they say, if I'm going to be treated like that by the senior leaders of this organisation, then this organisation is not for me. And they quit their jobs and they go and work for another organisation. And this aerospace company said, we have to change our leadership of style, otherwise we are never going to attract the talent that we need to take this business into the future. And what you have up on the screen is just some pure statistics about if a private construction industry had a 25.6 turnover rate every 12 months. They said that their cost to replace an employee was $13,935. If you've got a large firm of 40,000 full-time employees, the difference between a 15 and 25% turnover rate is 50 million annually. Now, this research was done about 15 years ago, so you can kind of bet that it's a lot more than that now. So what we need to do is to employ and develop leaders who are likely to retain the people that they leave, and more than just retain them, inspire them and make sure that they're in an environment that produces happy workers. To think about the bottom line, there's two things that I want to reference here. In 2011, the Gallup industry did a major survey, over 47,000 employees in 120 countries. This research found a very powerful relationship between emotional well-being, employee engagement, and profitability. And if you analyse the vast database, what they found was that over decades of research, the level of the engagement at work is one of the most powerful factors you can have in driving profitability. It was so fundamental that this research showed that companies with basic level engagement scores outperformed their competitors by 19%. So on every major metric, including productivity, profitability, EPS, safety, turnover, and absenteeism, engaged employees were way ahead. And the research also found that engaged employees were the most important measure of the financial health of an organisation. This kind of research overturns the old belief that it was technical skills and intellectual capacity that created a great workforce or equaled success. It's now showed that the number one challenge for leaders to be successful is engagement. People these days, the millennial workforce, want to feel something. They want to be moved. They want to be inspired. And therefore, we need to grow, choose, and develop our leaders on the basis of these kind of skills. Now, if we go from Gallup to a well-known person that all of you will be very familiar with and get his opinion on what happens to the workforce, let's see what, and the bottom line, let's see what Homer Simpson has to say. He says, if adults don't like their jobs, they don't go on strike, go in every day and do it really fast. You may laugh, but it's true, isn't it? That if you're not inspired by the work that you do, if you're not inspired by the leadership in the organisation of where you work, you are not going to be inspired to work really hard. So we're now in the business, in the workplace, of having to create an emotional experience, not just for customers. We've long known that marketing has to create an emotional experience for our customers in order to get them to buy. But we also have to do the same thing for our internal customers, which is every one of our employees. How does EQ therefore relate to a multi-generational workforce? It seems that the workforce is expanding in that the older we get, the less we can afford to retire in this day and age, and we have an increasingly ageing workforce. But we have to all work together with a totally new generation. So a little bit about what happens to emotional intelligence and age. This graph here demonstrates in generalized terms what happens to emotional intelligence in the normal population over a lifetime. You can see here that if the average EQ is 100, that when you're approaching 20, you've got in the general population on average an global EQ of around 90. As you age, this continues to increase up until about age 50, when it starts to drop off a little bit. You can have great discussions as to why that is, but we don't quite have time for that today. But what we want to notice is that, and I can see this, I'm going to show you the profile of somebody who fits this, that there are many young people with very high EQ scores, way beyond their years, which reinforces the idea that emotional intelligence can be learned. So if this is what happens in the normal population, if we specifically look out to teach and develop people's EQ early in life, they will be better equipped to be managers early in their career. In fact, we want all of our workforce to be able to engage in these set of skills and competencies. Keeping in mind that this age group here, below 30, generally have below average EQ, I want you to have a look at this group profile made up of a group of 30 graduates, in their first year graduates of a multinational company that we did some work with a couple of weeks ago in London. Now, it seems to me when I look at this profile that their number one skill that they have been recruited for into this graduate program is relationship skills. And this group of 30 young people who were all under 30 or across the business. So they were part of marketing, part of sales, part of finance, part of HR. They were a group of high potential, was believed to be high potential graduates that this company wanted to employ. And I find it very interesting that it's obvious that they've been employed on the basis of their ability to relate well. It was certainly a dynamic workshop to be part of. They were thoughtful, they were very engaged. Empathy scores show that they're quite engaging with each other. They had great relationship skills, and they scored quite well for their age group on this self-actualization. So self-actualization is the ability to set goals, to be an achiever, and to constantly grow and develop yourself in the life cycle and at work, whilst at the same time remaining passionate about your work and your life. So this young group were brought in on these skills, which is a really great place to start, and quite different to this next group of people, which is not the same organisation, but this is also a multinational company, and a group of average scores of 30 people that were tested for emotional intelligence. And these were a senior executive group of a very large company. And you can see by contrast that over the course of a lifetime in this, they've probably been working for this company for about 30 years, and they're probably in their late 40s, that their standout leadership skills, and these are a great group of leaders, are self-confidence, self-reliance, self-actualization, with some reasonably good levels of straightforwardness, relationship skills, self-control, optimism. But even in this group that are considered to be great leaders, if you asked the next level down from them, how were they as leaders, they still found them too controlling and too overwhelming, because they lack insight into two areas: into the way that they manage emotions, or they don't respect the way that they manage emotions, or to listening and engaging others in their own emotional state. So really interesting to see that contrast. And from where I sit, what is important is both these young people develop some of these skills of self-confidence, self-reliance and self-actualization and straightforwardness, but our senior leaders in organisations at the same time have a lot to learn from the new generation about empathy and understanding their own emotional states. So let's just take for a moment to think about the competencies that we need to look for versus the competencies that we need to develop when we're recruiting a new workforce. Here's a nice little equation that helps us to measure performance. Let me explain how it goes. We will say that leadership potential is the sum total of 3 sets of intelligence. If you think about what it takes to get through school and how you got to your final grade, it was usually your IQ that determined what kind of post-school education or employment you were going to do. So your IQ kind of gets you through school. Your TQ is the technical skills that you develop after school. So for some people, they may go and train to be a doctor, a lawyer, a nurse. They may take up a trade, or they may enter into an organisation and start to develop their skills in marketing or sales. So what gets you in the door of your first employment is usually a combination of your IQ and your technical skills. How well you do after the day you arrive, it can almost be multiplied by your emotional intelligence, because the 10 set of skills that I've showed you on these profiles are the skills that you need not only for your leadership potential, but to have a successful life too. So I would say that these are 10 skills that you need for personal and professional development. Here's the 2 profiles once again. So let's just have a look at them and think about if this is the course of a lifetime at work. We want to employ people that have really good relational skills, that have good skills to manage their emotions, and then over time we would expect to develop these other set of skills which are very obvious in standout strong leadership teams. I asked this group of people when I worked with them a couple of weeks ago why they thought as a group their straightforwardness was so low. And it was surprising because a lot of them said to me, it's not that we don't know how to be straightforward, it's that we've been selected and we feel very privileged to have been selected into this company as part of their graduate program. And at the moment we're in our first year, so it's appropriate for us to listen, to understand, to not have strong opinions just yet until we fully understand that the business that we've moved into. But they took it as a challenge to say that over the next few years, if they are going to be truly influential as leaders, they are going to have to build their straightforwardness. They're going to have to learn to control their emotions. They were young, they were enthusiastic, they were creative, they were entrepreneurial, but along with that goes people that are fairly emotionally expressive. So at some point what we want to do in great leadership is to learn to manage our emotions, not deny our emotions, but manage our emotions so that others can feel safe. We create safe workplaces, but also so that we learn to manage our own emotional states so as to not cause stress, which over the long term we know leads to physical breakdowns, to heart attacks, to strokes. So managing our emotions well is very important in the process of time. So here are 10 skills that can be used to select people that are high in EQ and then develop. If you've tested somebody for their emotional intelligence in the recruitment process, the bonus is that you know where the skills are that they need to operate out of as their strengths, and also the ones that they will need to develop in the development process. But let's not forget that great leaders have been demonstrated by research to have robust abilities and talents and skills in all these 10 areas. It's an interesting article that I'm just about near the end of what I'm going to present to you today. But this article that was published in 1998 by the Harvard Business Review has become one of the most requested articles historically. So it makes us curious as to what was this article saying that everybody has taken so much notice of. The article was by Daniel Goleman, and it was that IQ and technical skills are really important in the workplace, but its emotional intelligence is the sine qua non of leadership. It is the key thing for developing emotional and creating emotional connections with all stakeholders in the business. It is the key thing for having people who can communicate well to their people, that can engage and inspire others. It is a key skill that you want to develop trusted relationships in organisations and develop cultures that are collaborative. Rather than controlling, we want cultures that are collaborative, where people work well together, where that they can develop a resilience in the face of setback. And as Bev said, most importantly in this day and age is to have robust levels of adaptability, because we know that change is constant and the rate of change is becoming ever more rapid. So to conclude, people will work well for you, they will buy from you, and they will hire you in direct proportion to how much they like you. And it is my proposition that people will like you if you have a good balance of these 10 emotional competency and skills. And I want to just end with this profile of a high performer that I met a couple of weeks ago in doing some feedbacks for another company. This 27-year-old female walked in the room, and she was an amazing presence. Her confidence, as you can see by this, these are the ratings that she got on her 360 from all people after only working with them for 3 months. So her manager, her peers, her direct reports could say that at 27 years old, she has this signature outstanding ability of self-confidence, which really translates to competence. She's very competent. She's independent. She's self-driven. She has enormous passion and energy from their point of view. Look at her passion and energy from her point of view. She's working really, really hard right now, and she knows that in the future she's going to have to pull back a bit, because she's pushed so hard by 27 years to get on the executive team of an organisation. She's going to have to pace herself. But she's emotionally aware enough to take that on board. She can speak straightforwardly. She develops great relationships with people. They haven't quite yet felt the impact of her empathy to the same extent. She says she's holding back because she's in the process of driving change. And for few people that are her direct reports, this is quite challenging for them right now. She's extremely adaptable. She manages her emotions very well and has very robust levels of optimism. This is what great leadership looks like. And here is a 27-year-old who has very well-developed skills. I can hear some of you asking, but why is her self-knowing score so low compared with how she sees herself from raters? It's pretty simple, actually. This girl said to me, I came to this organisation, and it's fair to say that there is a lot of people that are feel very free to gossip. And somebody walks out the room and they're all talking about that person. in a way that is totally unacceptable anymore in the workplace. So I've had to come down pretty hard on the people around about me, and particularly my direct reports that are prone to gossip a lot. She said, so I am not prepared to let them know very much about my personal life or what I'm feeling at the moment until I've established my leadership presence. She knows that she has a lot to offer, and she knows that when she puts her in the right time and place, she can listen very well. But right now, those things are a little challenging. Anyway, so that comes to the end of my presentation, and I hope you've gained one or two things that you can take away there for you for thinking about emotional intelligence important for talent identification and also for developing great leaders once you have employed the talent into your organisation. We at Roche Martin have developed the Emotional Intelligence Selection Report. I'm not going to give you many details about this, but except to say that not only does it measure the 10 competencies of a candidate, it provides you with interview follow-up questions where you can know how to interview around each of those competencies, and then a way to evaluate what you've seen on the basis of interview and the test scores. If you want any further information about that, happy for you to contact me, judy@rochemartin.com, or ian@rochemartin.com, who is our CEO. So right now that finishes my level of my part of the presentation. I'm going to hand back to Beverly, and she's going to take us through the question and answer section for the next 15 minutes. Over to you, Beverly.
Brilliant. And thank you so much, Judy, just in terms of the thought-provoking insights and also the really clear explanations. So for me, you know, one of the key messages is really seeing emotional intelligence is more than people just being nice to people, but actually hard competence and that really good balance between the emotional and rational thinking. So massively appreciate the insight and the clarity. Thank you so much to everyone. We've had a number of questions that have been posted that we're currently going through. Just whilst we do that, we thought it would be great to have a quick poll that will appear on your screen, just to get your thoughts around the talent attraction and recruitment challenges that you currently face at the moment. So if you don't mind just taking sort of 30 seconds to have a read through that and select one of the responses, we'd be really interested in getting your feedback. Brilliant. Modern technology is showing me that you're responding, which is fantastic. Thank you so much. As I said, we've had a lot of questions come through, and I can't promise we're going to get through all of them, but a couple of them are fairly similar. So I'll start off with one for you, Judy, here. Everyone on this webinar will be familiar with the multiple benefits in attracting and hiring a diverse workforce. How do modern leaders need to evolve or develop their EQ to ensure they're creating an inclusive culture where everyone can thrive?
That's a really, really good question, and thank you to the person who's put that up. Emotions is a great enabler for attracting and hiring a diverse workforce because it's a set of skills that enable people to understand better the people they work with. This in turn promotes productivity in the workplace by making it easier for teams to bring out the best in everyone. If you're creating a diverse workplace, it really requires people to think creatively, adapt to ambiguity, to respond empathically, and to collaborate to leverage the different talents and perspectives that have been brought into the organisation. But before a team can work well, the people in it have to feel psychologically safe with one another to cooperate. So it's all very well to have a diverse organisation, but we need to have safety front and central of that. Safety is achieved by establishing an environment where people are committed to understanding each other and every person needs to feel valued. This in turn allows each person to feel secure enough not to have to dominate others or take the lead when they can see another person could do it better than they could. In other words, this requires a level of trust that only high EQ can establish. It was interesting. There's a Dutch study that was done in 2013 about cultural diversity and team performance, and they found that diverse teams made up of people who were willing to learn perform better overall than homogenous teams. It supports the idea that when people have high EQ and are willing to learn, diversity becomes an incredibly valuable resource. The study, however, also showed that intellectual and talent potential and diversity was wasted on teams who are less open to people who are different from them. So we're all for diversity and inclusion, and emotional intelligence is one of those things that helps us along its way. That's as much as I can probably come up with in this short period of time.
Brilliant.
Back to you, Beverly.
Thanks, Judy. So a recurring question here: how can you help staff to improve their emotional intelligence?
Well, that's a very big question, and there is a lot that can be done. At Roche Martin, when we go into organisations to help staff develop their emotional intelligence, first thing that you want to do is raise the awareness of the organisation and of the leadership team of what is emotional intelligence, and give them a snapshot of two things: to give them a language that they can use to describe it, but also increase their awareness by seeing how they measure up on something like an EQ profile. So we have two approaches. Sometimes we go in and we would work with an organisation, and there are a lot of trained EQ coaches out there in the workplace that will come in and raise the awareness by taking the group through a workshop journey on emotional intelligence. We find that sometimes, usually, we can fast track that learning by each person going through an emotional intelligence test that not only where they rate themselves, but they have the insight of the 360, which gives them how other people see them. So you don't end up like that first profile I showed you of a leader who says, EQ, I'm all over that. I absolutely believe in it, and I think I've got good levels of it. Only to measure him and find out that he's the only one that has that opinion. So it's really important not just to measure EQ, but to think about it as how we're going to develop it. There are a number of ways that this can be done. One-on-one executive coaching is a brilliant way to develop that. Not everybody can afford a coach, and not every organisation can afford to put them in place. So we have developed, and I'm sure there are other people that have developed resources. We have online modules that teach emotional intelligence, kind of like your online coach, that you can buy a module and do the work yourself. And then often in organisations that we work with, they take their emotional intelligence profile, and that goes into all of their leadership and their personal development profile that they are then called to account for over a period of time. So there's some of the ways that you can do that. In other organisations, in large organisations, we go in and we train HR staff to become the experts on emotional intelligence, so that they're then empowered to be able to test and develop and run workshops themselves from within the company, and that way they can grow the emotional intelligence of their organisation. So there's just a few things, Beverly.
Brilliant. That's really useful. Thanks, Judy. Unfortunately, we're running out of time now for additional questions, but I just wanted to highlight a post that somebody's put up on the screen, which I thought was a great summary, really, of the content that's been covered, which is your IQ will get you the interview, your EQ will get you your promotion. So I don't know your thoughts on that, Judy, but I thought it was a great summary.
That is a lovely summary, yes. And it's a little bit like the formula that I put up. Your IQ gets you through school, your technical skill gets you the job, and then how well you do in leadership and in life is kind of multiplied by the level of emotional intelligence that you have.
Brilliant. So everybody, it's been an absolute pleasure to host this webinar today. And at Page Group, we believe we've got a really important role to play in creating interesting content, running webinars and events such as this to really provide you with resources which add value to both your recruitment and also your talent strategies. For those of you who are interested in seeing more of the insights and tools that we have, you can visit our website where you can find the top 100 skills tool that I referenced earlier, and also our career chat podcast with the likes of Sir Ranulph Fiennes and also the cricketer Matthew Hoggart. We'll send the links to our resources via the webinar recording too. So all that's left for me to do is thank you again, Judy, for all your expertise and your insights. Also to thank everybody who's attended, and I hope you all have a really good day. Many thanks.
It was an absolute pleasure to be part of this. So thank you to Bev for your contributions too. And I really enjoyed being part of this. So goodbye from me.
Many thanks.